Okay, we're holding chapter 6 in the Maimer Vihine Parach Matei Aharon. We'll recap what we've been saying till now. So we talked about the fact that we pray every single day, and every day we ask God for our needs. And the question is asked, why would we need to ask God for our needs and pray every day if it's already predetermined? On the high holidays, we're already signed, sealed, and delivered for a new year, for a good year, and everything that is, bless you, everything that we're going to earn and make, both in materially and health-wise, and our children, all of that is already determined on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So if it's already determined, so then why would we have to pray for it every single day? What are we praying for? It's already done. It's a done deal. So we explained that the issue is that there could be a delay. In other words, when things are determined on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they're determined in a spiritual sense. And from the spiritual realm, from the spiritual reality to our physical, material reality in this world, there's a big journey that the blessing has to make. And sometimes it gets delayed, it gets held up. So therefore we pray every day, asking for it to be manifest in the physical world. But we asked about that. We said, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's not just that we're praying and the determination is that we should be blessed, in Malchus of Atzilus. We're being blessed for the physical world. The determination, the factors about the physical world. And when we daven, we're asking for our needs in this world. That's what we're praying for and asking for when we ask for a good new year. So if we're asking for things in the material world, in our world, and it's determined that we should be granted all these things in our world, so then what's the holdup? What's the disconnect? So we introduced in chapter 5, we brought an analogy. We said that when a person thinks about doing something, so when you think about doing something, so first you start thinking to yourself about the idea, about a certain thing, whether it's appropriate to do X, Y, or Z. And you come to a conclusion that you feel that doing this is appropriate, it's the right thing to do, and you should do it. Now, when you're thinking about it, it's not just that you're thinking about, let's say, an example, we give, exercise, whether you should exercise. So it's not just that you could think about the concept of exercise. Is exercise good, bad, or whatever? But then there's a thinking about whether you should exercise. How are you feeling, and where you're at in life, and you want to think about you as it relates to you specifically. Should I exercise, right? And you come to the conclusion that you should. And what happens? Do you start exercising? No. You wake up the next morning, and it's raining, and you start thinking about it, and you have to reevaluate and reconsider. So in other words, you already thought in your mind, and you came to a conclusion and understanding that you should exercise. That wasn't an abstract thought. That was a thought connected to action. And yet, when it comes into actually putting it into practice, to doing it, you reconsider. In other words, so two things are happening here. Number one, when we say you're reconsidering, number one, what happens is that the fact that you've determined that you should exercise, you understand that that's something that you should do and is the right thing to do, that doesn't compel you to do it. You still have to. You're still reconsidering or reevaluating. You're still thinking about it again. That's one thing. But besides that, the second thing is that the fact that you're thinking about it again means you're reconsidering it. Reconsidering something means that you could possibly come to the opposite conclusion. So last night, before you went to bed, you thought that the thing to do is to exercise. And that was determination, and tomorrow morning you're going to wake up, you're going to exercise. And then into the morning, and what happens? You reconsider. So even if you'll reconsider and go through the same process and come to the same conclusion, but it's certainly possible that you'll come to the opposite conclusion. Now today it's raining, my knee hurts, there's no exercise today. So it's possible that it won't happen. That's one thing we said. But we took that, we broke that down a little bit more. And we explained it like this, that there's the concept that you think about, even as the concept relates to action, whether I should exercise or not. But then that process has to go from your mind, from your intellect, into your garments. So it's divided into, you divide person to two categories. You have your internal faculties and abilities, which are generally divided into intellect and emotion, and then you have your garments, your external faculties. So your koiches pnimim, your internal, your inner powers and faculties, that's who you are, right? How you see things, how you see the world, how you understand things, how you feel about things, that's you. That's who you are. Your garments, your thought, speech, and action, those are external qualities, those are external faculties. That's what you do, right? Why is that not who you are? Because you could think other people's thoughts, you could speak other people's words, you could do other people's actions. So you could be doing things that aren't you, right? So I could understand something one way, but you could tell me, you know what, I want you to think about the other perspective. I want you to think about it from the other side. So I'm thinking about something from another perspective, but it's not my perspective. I understand it this way. Right? So it's possible to do. So that's already external. That's something that's outside of the person. So, but every time we want to take something from an idea into action, it goes through a whole process. It starts in your intellect, where you think about the thing, and you think about whether it's an appropriate thing. Once you think about those things, generally you'll also have an emotion. We don't really talk about the impact of emotion here in that aspect. But then it goes into thought. So even though there's a difference between the intellect, the thinking as it relates to the world of intellect, and thinking as it relates to the world of the garments, to the action. And that is because you can't know what it is that you understand, or you can't comprehend consciously without thinking. Thinking is the process by which you're conscious, you're aware of your thought process. Why? Because we need to think in words, or we need to explore and understand in words. So that's basically the process of thinking as it relates to intellect and to understanding. So, but when I'm thinking about an idea in the world, and it's in my world of intellect, in that domain. So the thinking process, the thought process, is not what's dominant here. What's dominant here is the idea, the world of idea. So I'm thinking that's just a way for me to be able to harness the idea, to be able to develop and formulate the idea. But really what's active here is the idea. Then there's the garment of thinking, there's the act of thinking. When you're thinking about something, not about the idea itself and comprehending it, but thinking about it, and particularly even in how the particulars and how to get it done, how to do it, that's already in the world of thought. So the point is that something goes from the world of idea to thought. From thought it goes into speech, and from speech into action. And even, we talked about in last class, even when you can do something without speaking in between about it. I could think about something and then do it without talking in between. And yet, Chassidus explains that really, spiritual at least, it goes through the component of speech as well. Whatever, that's a different topic. Point is that something goes through this process. So it starts in the world of thought, in the world of intellect, and then it goes to thought, then to speech, and then to action. And every step of the way, you have to reconsider it. You have to think about it again. So for something to transition from the world of intellect to the world of thought, to that garment, there's a reconsideration. But to think about actually doing it. Then to speak it, whether you should say it, you reconsider that again. And then finally, the world of action, the same thing. To actually do it, you think about it again. Now, even though you have there's the gap between your internal self, the world of ideas, and your garments, the world of action, right, or the external aspect of yourself, but there's also a very big gap between intellect, thought, speech, and then action. We ended last class about this idea. Remember, we talked about in Basi Lagani, the letter Hey, that thought and speech are connected, but Maisa, Afasisiv, is disconnected, because act is literally in something outside of yourself. It's completely outside of the person, whereas thought and speech are still connected to the person. So the point is that gap is even greater. There's an even greater consideration between thinking and speaking about something and actually doing it, right? Like they say, talk is cheap, or you can talk about something, you can talk a big game, but show me what you're going to do, right? So there's a much bigger gap when I could think something and I could say something and give a whole passionate speech about doing something, but the actual doing it, that deliberation, that process where you transition from the world of speech to the world of action, that's already an even bigger gap. What's the point of this analogy? Is to tell us that we see that you have something that's in the world of thought, or the world of ideas, in your intellect. And in the world of intellect, it's introduced, it's present in the world of your intellect, as it relates to action, about something that should be done. And yet, to bring it from there down into action, to actually doing it in a literal, practical sense, that goes through a very big process, and there's all kinds of deliberations and delays and potential obstacles that will prevent it from actually coming to fruition. So we can understand, back in the analog, going back to the Nimshal, what we're talking about our blessings, what God has determined for us already on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and how it ultimately comes down into our physical world. So the question was, if the deliberation on the high holidays by God and His determination relates to the physical world, so then what's the delay? What's the problem? We're talking about in the physical world, and yet we understand from our own process, and we bring something from ideas to fruition, to physical action, there's this whole process and potential delays and reconsideration. So the same is true with regard to that. And that's where chapter 6 picks up. So let's go to chapter 6. So the same is true with regard to the analog. We're talking about, as relate to our topic, about our blessings that are determined for us already in the beginning of the year. As we said in chapter 2, that on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, what's the determination, the judgment? You're inscribed and sealed for a good year, and where does that take place? Where is that deposited? In Malchus of Atzilus. V'yadua, she'atzilus u'biyah, hem dugmas keches apnimim seichel amidus, v'gimel alavush machshav v'dibur ma'isa. You have 4 worlds, generally. There are 4 worlds that are part of the 4 stages of creation until we get to our world, right? You have Atzilus, that's the highest. Then you have Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. So the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, Bria of creation, Yitzira of formation, and Asiya of action. We reside in this world in Asiya of Asiya, in the lowest level, the lowest realm of the world of Asiya. We're on the lowest rung there, Tachtein Shein Tachtein Lamatei Mena, on the lowest floor. So Atzilus, these 4 worlds, there's also a fundamental difference between these worlds. The world of Atzilus it's a world. It's called Olam HaAtzilus. It's a world of Atzilus. The world meaning it's a form of a creation. It's already creation. And then you have Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. So sometimes we talk about the worlds of Bia, the 3, Bia, Bria, Yitzir, Asiya. What happened to Atzilus? Why is Atzilus not excluded? So the reason is because there's a fundamental difference between Atzilus and Bia. And that's similar to what we just said in our little recap, the difference between your internal faculties and your garments. That your seichel amidus, your intellect and your emotions, that's who you are. Those are internal. It's a part of you. Whereas your garments, those are external. Those are impersonal. Those aren't who you are. They're what you do, but not what you are. So similarly, it says about Atzilus is Iu v'chayoichad, Iu v'garmoichad, that in Atzilus it's all God. There's all you feel. Obviously, Atzilus is, like we said, it's a world, but all you sense in Atzilus is godliness. There's godliness. There's no, even though there's a concept, it's a world, so there's a concept of light and vessel, Eris and Kalim, but all of it doesn't, there's no separateness, there's no feeling of any otherness other than godliness. It's all one with God. Similar to what we say about our seichel amidus, our intellect and our emotions, we obviously are not, our sum total is not our intellect and emotions. We're far beyond our intellect and emotions. And yet, our intellect and emotions are part of us. There's no separateness that's felt there. When we think about ourselves, what we feel is part of who we are. On the other hand, we can't be reduced to what we feel. We exist, and we operate far beyond what we understand and comprehend and what we feel. A person whose mind is not working properly, a person has no emotions, is still a person. They're not, so they're lacking maybe an important part of an expression even within the self. But the person is a lot more than just his intellect and emotion. And yet, the intellect and emotion are part of who you are. They're not separate. They're not separate to you, from you. Whereas your garments, as we said, machshava, dibur, ma'aser, your thought, speech, and action are separate. They're disconnected from you. So similarly, Atzilus and Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, we have the same distinction. Atzilus is like the inner type of powers, the powers that are one with the person himself. You don't feel anything separate. There's no otherness there. And then you have Bria, Yitzir, Asiya, which are like Machshava, Dibur, Maisa, thought, speech, and action. And also going in the devolving stages, whereas when we talk about the world of Machshava is really, of the garments, it's the most internal one. You think, nobody knows what you're thinking. Right? That's completely personal, it's completely inside. But we explained why it's still considered external, but it's still closer to the person. Speech is already the process of those ideas coming outwards, being communicated outward to something else, and then action is completely an investment in something totally outside of yourself. So similarly, Bria, Yitzir, Asiya go through that same progression, where Bria already there's otherness that's already present, but within the holiness, then Yitzir is another outward, another step out, and then Asiya till we come to our world, and Asiya, the lowest part of it, where it feels completely disconnected, completely independent. So the same is true with regard to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that what's deposited for us is in the world, in Malchus of Atzilus. Well, Malchus of Atzilus, that's like the idea as it is within our intellect. But then it's got to get through Bria, Yitzir, Asiya. It's got to go through this process of, as we said, just as in the person, in the analogy, we said you go from your intellect into your garments, into thought, speech, and action. The same is true here. It's got to go from Atzilus, it's got to get through Bria, Yitzir, Asiya. It has to pass through all of these till it comes to us in the lowest part of Asiya. Here we're addressing that initial question, which is the determination of Yom Kippur is for the physical world. So true that it's about what we should be given and granted in the physical world. Nevertheless, nevertheless, since the world of Atzilus is similar to the internal faculties of the individual, which are far removed from the garments, from the thought, speech, and action. So therefore, so this is similar to the analogy where the person's thinking about whether this thing is worthy of doing, whether you should do this thing. How do I feel about doing X, Y, or Z? At that stage, as we explained earlier in chapter 5, it's all within the person, it's all within the realm of intellect. So even though you're thinking about doing an action, an actual activity, nevertheless, it's doing the activity as you see it within your intellect. It's the idea of doing the activity that excites you. The action is included within the intellect. That's true. But it's within the intellect. It's an intellect, it's an idea, it's not an action. In order for it to continue coming down till the world of Asiya, and especially in our physical world, in the lowest level here, so first it's got to go into the world of Bria, into the world of thought, then to Bria, and so every step of the way, as the blessing it transitions from Atzilus to Bria, from Bria to Yitzir, and from Yitzir to Asiya, it has these two delays that it goes through as well. What are the two delays that we mentioned before? The first one is that just because it's determined that you should have it, doesn't compel it to continue moving forward. It could still remain abstract. It could still remain in the previous state. It doesn't have to be propelled forward. That's number one. And number two, since there's a deliberation, it's possible that the determination will be the opposite, that it should stop right here. So it was determined that you should be given in the physical world, in the Elam HaMaisa, in the world of action, you should be given X, Y, or Z. And yet, once it comes from Atzilus to Bria, they can decide it doesn't have to continue. We have to deliberate whether it should go from Bria to Yitzir and from Yitzir to Asiya. And at any step of the way, it's possible that the determination will be that no, it stops here. That what was determined for you to get in the physical world, since it's just an idea, it's in the world of the idea, it's the physical as it's within the intellect, within the idea, this is where it stops. So this gives us clarity and insight into what it means that you're granted, it's determined that you should get something, and yet you get it beruchnis, spiritual worlds, because we throw that term around, right? This is the simple answer. It's like, why do you pray if it's already determined? Because it could come to you spiritually. This gives us more insight into this, what this means. That is even though Rosh Yom Kippur, the deliberation, the determination is made for material for material blessing. So why is it then that it should remain in the spiritual realm, or it should just be added to Gan Eden and not come to the physical world? Because in Atzilus, because in Atzilus, and even so, it's also to a lesser extent, but certainly as well in Bria and Yetzira, these physical things are as they are spiritual. Similar to the action that's in the determination, the resolution of the intellect. In the world of speech. And this is why every single day there's another determination, another judgment about whether this kindness, this energy flow should come down. Even though Rosh Hashanah Kippur, the determination is also not just in the general, but even in the details, in the specific details. And so why is it that then we have to reevaluate that and we ask for specific needs? We don't just, it's not just a general prayer, whatever was determined should come down, but we ask specifically, because because as these things remain in the spiritual realm, they are removed from a material form. And therefore, it has to be another evaluation, another determination as to how it should take on, the form it should take on this world. So, for instance, we talked about in the first class, I think, what does $1 million, what do $1 million spiritual dollars look like? We think dollars, we think, cold hard cash, right? We know what that looks like. I mean, maybe we know what it looks like. We might not know actually what $1 million in cash looks like. But the point is, we have an idea of what that looks like. So if it was determined in Rosh Hashanah and Kippur that you're going to get $1 million cash, what do $1 million spiritual dollars in cash look like? So it's very specific. And yet in the spiritual, it's totally removed from the physical form. And so therefore, just saying spiritually $1 million cash could come out in any other way, because it's not limited, and it doesn't take on the form and the shape of the physical manifestation of that. And so therefore your $1 million cash could manifest itself in one way in the physical world, it could manifest itself in another way. And that's why even though on one hand, on Rosh Hashanah Kippur, it's not just the general idea, but all the details are already determined beforehand, yet we still pray. Not only do we pray so that what was already determined should come down, but we even pray for specific needs, because just because I was granted, it was determined that I'm going to get X, it doesn't mean that it's going to come down as X when it comes to this world. So it's not just that we pray for it to come to the physical world, we also have to pray about the specifics of it so that it comes down specifically in that way. Because in the spiritual world, it's a lot more abstract, and it could come down any other way. So the question, okay, so so now we've explained this idea of why we have to pray. The question now becomes, so how is it possible then? How does this relate to what we're talking about the Aharon HaKohen and the priestly blessing, and how that's different than what we've been talking about? So that we'll get to in Mr. Shem next class.